Whispers in the garden, the crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the ballroom as Olivia Hart smoothed the silk of her emerald dress. She had stopped counting how many charity galas she'd attended over the years, but tonight felt different. The air carried something heavy, something unspoken that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Your shelter project is truly inspiring," Mrs. Henderson cooed, her perfume overpowering as she leaned close. But Olivia caught the way the woman's eyes darted toward the bar, where Marcus stood laughing with colleagues. "You're so dedicated to helping others, so ... selfless." The word hung in the air like an accusation disguised as praise. Olivia had learned long ago to read between the lines of society's carefully crafted compliments. She smiled warmly, thanking Mrs. Henderson, before excusing herself to check on the silent auction tables. As she walked away, she heard the whispers start like rustling leaves before a storm. The women's shelter had been Olivia's passion project for 5 years. What began as volunteering had grown into managing the entire operation, and now they were raising funds to expand. She'd poured her heart into creating a safe haven for women escaping difficult situations, never imagining she might one day understand their pain more intimately. "Olivia, dear, come sit with me." Ruth's weathered hand patted the empty chair beside her. At 73, Ruth had founded the shelter decades ago and remained its spiritual compass. Her eyes, sharp as ever, studied Olivia's face. "You look troubled, just tired," Olivia replied, settling into the chair with practiced grace. "The expansion plans are consuming." Ruth's single syllable carried volumes of disbelief. "I've known you since you were a volunteer, barely out of college. You don't get tired. You get worried. There's a difference." Olivia's fingers traced the stem of her champagne glass. Across the room, Marcus threw his head back in laughter. A young woman stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm a moment too long. Vanessa Cole, the new accountant his partner Thomas had hired 6 months ago. She was beautiful in that sharp, ambitious way that turned heads and opened doors. "People talk," Ruth said softly, "but people always talk. The question is whether there's truth in the noise." "I don't know," Olivia admitted, her voice barely audible over the orchestra, "and I'm not sure I want to." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Strength isn't about knowing everything, child. Sometimes it's about knowing what to do when you don't know anything at all." As the evening wore on, Olivia moved through the crowd with the same warm smile she always wore. She thanked donors, discussed plans for the shelter's new wing, and posed for photographs. When Marcus finally found her near midnight, his tie loosened and his eyes glassy from whiskey, she slipped her hand into his without hesitation. "Ready to go home?" she asked. He nodded, and they left together, the perfect couple framed in the doorway as they departed. Behind them, the whispers continued. But Olivia kept walking forward, her head held high, her silence more powerful than any accusation she could have spoken. Asterisk the weight of knowing. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Olivia prepared coffee, the routine comforting in its mundanity. Marcus had left early for a meeting, kissing her forehead in that distracted way that had become his habit. She didn't mention the perfume she'd smelled on his collar, floral and young. Nothing like the subtle jasmine she wore. Her sister Jenny burst through the door without knocking, her face flushed with anger. "Have you seen this?" She thrust her phone forward, displaying a blurry photograph from last night's gala. Marcus and Vanessa, standing too close, her hand on his chest. "I've seen it," Olivia said calmly, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "And you're just going to ignore it?" Jenny's voice rose with frustration. "Olivia, everyone is talking. That woman is half your age, and she's circling your husband like a vulture." "Then let her circle." Olivia sat down, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I won't give her the satisfaction of a reaction." At Marcus's downtown office, Thomas knocked on the conference room door, his expression grave. "We need to talk," he said, spreading financial reports across the mahogany table. "There are discrepancies in the accounts. Small at first, but they're growing." Marcus rubbed his temples. "How much are we talking about?" 50,000 so far. Maybe more." Thomas hesitated. "It started around the time Vanessa joined us. I'm not accusing anyone, but someone has access they shouldn't have." Marcus's phone buzzed. Another text from Vanessa asking to meet privately to discuss urgent business matters. He deleted it, guilt settling in his stomach like stones. He'd been flattered by her attention, had allowed lunches to run long and conversations to drift into inappropriate territory. But he'd never crossed the line she wanted him to cross, though he'd come dangerously close to that edge. That evening, Olivia stood before 30 women at the shelter discussing plans for the new wing. Patricia, a recent arrival with bruises still fading from her arms, raised her hand. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "You seem like you have everything. Why spend so much time with people like us?" Olivia met her eyes. "Because having everything on the outside means nothing if you're empty inside. And because every woman deserves a place where she's valued, respected, and safe. No exceptions." Patricia nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. Later, as Olivia was leaving, the younger woman caught her arm. "My husband seemed perfect too," she whispered. "Everyone thought I was lucky, but perfect is just a mask people wear until they think you can't leave." The words followed Olivia home, echoing in the silence of her car. When she arrived, Marcus was already there, pacing the living room with documents scattered across the coffee table. "We have problems at the firm," he said, without preamble. "Money's missing. Thomas thinks it's been going on for months." Olivia set down her purse. "What are you going to do?" "Hire an investigator. Audit everything." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something cracked in his expression. "Olivia, I don't," she said quietly. "Not yet. Handle your business first." He nodded, grateful for the reprieve he didn't deserve. As Olivia climbed the stairs to their bedroom, Jenny's words rang in her ears, but she wouldn't confront, wouldn't accuse, wouldn't break. She'd learned from the women at her shelter that survival sometimes meant staying silent until you understood the full scope of the battle. And this battle, she sensed, was only beginning. Foundation's crumbling Detective Barnes sat across from Marcus and Thomas, his notepad filled with damning evidence. "The trail leads directly to Miss Cole's access codes," he said, sliding photographs across the desk. "She's been siphoning funds through fake vendor accounts for 8 months. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Vanessa had been so helpful, so eager to take on extra responsibilities. He'd been blind, flattered by her attention while she robbed him blind. "There's more," Barnes continued. "She's been building a case against you personally, Mr. Hart. Saved text messages, manufactured evidence suggesting an affair. My guess is she planned to blackmail you once she'd taken enough." Thomas let out a low whistle. "She played us all." At the shelter, Olivia reviewed architectural plans for the new wing, but her mind wandered. Ruth sat beside her, knitting needles clicking rhythmically. "It had been quieter than usual," the older woman observed. "I'm watching a storm approach," Olivia replied, deciding whether to seek shelter or stand in the rain. "Sometimes the storm washes things clean." Ruth's needles never stopped moving. "Sometimes it tears everything down so you can rebuild stronger." Patricia entered the room, her eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. She'd found a job, started therapy, was rebuilding her life piece by piece. "I wanted to thank you," she told Olivia. "You never judged me for staying too long or leaving too late. Just held space for me to figure it out." Patricia left. Ruth set down her knitting. "That's what love does, you know, real love. It holds space. It doesn't demand or control or manipulate. It just remains." The words settled into Olivia's heart like seeds. That evening, Vanessa was escorted from the building by security, her face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed at Marcus as she passed. "Everyone already believes we were together. Your reputation is ruined either way." But Marcus barely heard her. He was thinking of Olivia, of her silence over the past weeks, of the way she'd continued her work without faltering. He'd mistaken her quietness for ignorance, but now he understood it was something else entirely. It was strength he'd never possessed. The scandal broke the next morning. Local news picked up the story. Promising accountant caught embezzling from prominent developer. Reporters camped outside their home, hungry for details about the alleged affair. Olivia ignored them all. She went to the shelter, met with contractors, consoled a new resident, whose husband had found her hiding place. When Jenny called, frantic about the media coverage, Olivia simply said, "It will pass." "How can you be so calm?" Jenny demanded. "Because I know who I am," Olivia replied. "I know what's true. The rest is just noise." The reckoning Judge Morrison's courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee as Vanessa Cole stood before the bench, her lawyer arguing for leniency. Thomas sat in the gallery beside Marcus. Both men grim-faced as the prosecutor outlined the extent of the theft: $170,000, elaborate falsified records, and a calculated plan to destroy Marcus's marriage and reputation. "She targeted you specifically," the prosecutor explained during a recess. "Found out about your wife's charity work, your stable marriage, and saw it as a challenge. The money was almost secondary to the game." Marcus felt sick. He'd been so focused on his business, on growth and success, that he'd stopped seeing what mattered. Vanessa's attention had been intoxicating because it made him feel young and desired. He'd almost destroyed everything for that hollow feeling. Claire Brennan, investigative journalist, cornered Marcus outside the courthouse. "Mr. Hart, is it true your wife knew about the affair all along? Is that why she's standing by you out of pity?" "There was no affair," Marcus said firmly. "And my wife stands beside me because that's who she is. Something you'd understand if you spent less time inventing stories and more time recognizing integrity." That evening, Marcus found Olivia in the garden she'd cultivated over 15 years of marriage. Roses climbed the trellis, lavender bordered the stone path, and a small fountain bubbled peacefully. She sat on the bench they'd chosen together when they'd first bought the house, young and full of dreams. "I almost lost this," Marcus said, sitting beside her. "Not because of Vanessa, but because I forgot to see it." Olivia didn't look at him. "Did you sleep with her?" "No." His voice was raw, "but I wanted her to want me. I let her in too close because it fed something broken in me." "That's almost as bad." "It's not." Olivia finally met his eyes. "Almost isn't the same as actually. Intent isn't the same as action. But it's close enough to hurt." "Why didn't you say anything?" "All those weeks you knew something was wrong, because I was deciding," Olivia said simply. "Women come to my shelter after years of being told they're crazy for what they feel, paranoid for what they suspect. I wasn't going to accuse you without being certain. I needed to know if the marriage was worth fighting for. And is it?" Olivia was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. "Patricia told me something last week. She said her husband seemed perfect until he wasn't, and by then she'd lost herself trying to maintain the illusion. I won't lose myself, Marcus. Not for you, not for anyone. I'm not asking you to." Marcus reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "I'm asking for a chance to remember why I fell in love with you. It's to be the man who deserves your strength, instead of taking it for granted." Ruth's words echoed in Olivia's mind. Real love holds space. She looked at her husband, seeing both who he was and who he could still become. The choice was hers, and hers alone. Asterisk Grace under fire 3 months later, the shelter's new wing opened its doors. 50 additional beds, a child care center, job training facilities, and counseling offices spread across the expanded space. Stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by donors, residents, and volunteers who'd made it possible. Marcus stood in the back, watching his wife shine. He'd spent the past months rebuilding his business, attending therapy, and learning that success meant nothing if you lost yourself achieving it. Vanessa was serving 2 years for embezzlement, her reputation destroyed. His own reputation had taken hits, but slowly, steadily. He was earning back trust. Claire Brennan approached Olivia after the ceremony. "Mrs. Hart, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you, about your motivations." "Can I ask what made you stay?" Olivia considered the question. "I stayed because leaving would have been about her, about reacting to someone else's actions. I stayed because of me, because of what I'd built, because of what I still believed in. That's the difference people don't understand. Strength isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about knowing your worth and choosing from that place, not from anger or hurt." Ruth approached as Claire left, her smile warm. "You did good, child, both with the shelter and with everything else." "I learned from the best," Olivia replied, embracing her mentor. You taught me that silence can be powerful when it comes from certainty, not fear. Patricia, now working as the shelter's assistant coordinator, joined them. I've been thinking about what you said at the opening, she told Olivia. About choosing from strength, not pain. I thought staying with my husband was strength. Walking away was stronger. Everyone's path is different, Olivia said gently. You needed to leave to find yourself. I needed to stay to keep myself. Neither choice is wrong when it's made consciously. That evening, Marcus cooked dinner for the first time in years. Something simple, but made with care. They ate on the patio as fireflies began their twilight dance. Thomas wants to expand into community development, Marcus said. Affordable housing, neighborhood revitalization, projects that actually help people instead of just generating profit. That sounds like you're remembering why you started, Olivia observed. I'm remembering a lot of things. He reached across the table, his hand open, waiting, including that, the strongest person I know never raised her voice, never sought revenge, never made me choose between pride and redemption. You just held the door open and let me decide if I was man enough to walk through it. Olivia took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the warmth she'd known for 15 years. We're not fixed, she said honestly. Hey, this isn't a fairy tale ending where everything's perfect now. No, Marcus agreed, but it's a real ending. It's a real beginning. That's better than perfect. The community never forgot the scandal, but over time, the story changed. It became less about the affair that never was, and more about the woman who refused to be defined by someone else's actions. Olivia's shelter thrived, her reputation as someone who practiced what she preached growing stronger. Women came not just seeking refuge, but seeking the kind of quiet strength she embodied. Years later, when Patricia became the shelter's director, she kept a quote framed in her office. Grace under fire isn't about being unburned. It's about refusing to let the flames define your shape. Olivia had taught her that, and in teaching it, had reminded herself that the loudest victories often come wrapped in silence. That standing beside someone isn't weakness when you do it from wholeness, not from fear of being alone. She'd won not by fighting Vanessa, but by refusing to enter a battle that was never really about her at all. Her silence hadn't been submission, it had been sovereignty, and that made all the difference.